In an era when women seldom pursued a profession, Beatrix Farrand's trailblazing career in landscape architecture marked her as a true pioneer. Farrand's design projects ranged from White House gardens and private university campuses, including Princeton and Yale, to estate plans for some of our country's most prominent families. With a keen understanding of horticulture and an impressive eye for design, she created some of the most extraordinary landscapes in America.
Beatrix Farrand is one of the most important landscape architects of the 20th century because she was a great artist.
She was really the first one to run and create a very successful practice. She was very knowledgeable and she had an exquisite sense of design.
Beatrix Jones was born in 1872 in New York City. The only child of a prominent family and the niece of Edith Wharton, Beatrix grew up in the privileged world of the East Coast elite. The family's social circle included the J.P. Morgans, the Roosevelts, and the Rockefellers. While in her 20s, Beatrix, who had a passion for plants, was encouraged by a close family friend, Charles Sprague Sargent, to study horticulture at Harvard's Arnold Arboretum.
After her year-long study with Professor Sargent, she and her mother went on a 4-month trip to see gardens in Europe.
When Beatrix returned home, she arranged for a private tutor in civil engineering from Columbia University. Her first major commission was in Maine on Mount Desert Island. This was the first of over 50 summer houses she would landscape in the Bar Harbor area where her family also had a summer home. Farrand's flawless professional demeanor, intelligence, and hard work helped her succeed in a man's world.
It was very unusual for a woman to get any kind of commission other than a quote-unquote flower garden, whereas the men took on the greater commissions called landscape architecture. She kind of was the first one to cross that invisible line.
Beatrix was also a garden scholar, amassing a library of more than 2,700 volumes. At the age of 27, Farrand was invited as one of 11 individuals to help found the American Society of Landscape Architects, the only woman in the group. As Beatrix Farrand's landscape practice became more established, she began to work on a wide range of institutional commissions, including the East Garden for President Woodrow Wilson at the White House and the Rose Garden at the New York Botanical Garden. Farrand's work on large, complex college campuses began in 1912, when she was commissioned to design the campus grounds for Princeton University.
She did essentially the whole campus. She certainly was the first woman to ever have been hired by a campus to do landscape.
It was during her work for Princeton that Beatrix met her future husband, Max Farrand, a distinguished Yale professor. After their marriage in 1913, the couple moved to New Haven, Connecticut, where they lived for the next 14 years.
Those were the years, too, that she designed the 2 gardens for which she was to become best known.
Well, the Abbey Aldrich Rockefeller Garden in Maine is important for a number of reasons. It combines Farrand's agility in doing formal gardens and her love of native plants. I can't think of any other garden that's extant today that has both of those principles. The other garden is, of course, Dumbarton Oaks in Washington, D.C., where around the dwelling we have a series of formal gardens, the emphasis on ornamental trees and shrubs.
Beatrix Farrand's highly developed understanding of architecture and incorporating the natural contour of the land into her designs made her one of the most sought-after landscape architects in the country. During her time in New Haven, Beatrix also left her mark on Connecticut's landscape.
One of the major gardens that one can visit here is the Harkness Memorial State Park. Beatrix Farrand came in and redesigned parts of the garden, added new gardens, and over the last 20 years or so, the gardens have been immaculately restored.
In Bridgewater, Connecticut, Farrand designed a small walled garden which had all but disappeared until recently, when a local group successfully rehabilitated the garden, calling it Promisec.
Another project that Beatrix worked on in Connecticut is Hillstead for Theodate Pope. About 20 years ago, the garden was about to be restored, and nobody knew that Beatrix Farrand had been called in to provide a planting plan.
So we literally stopped everything sent out to Berkeley, and lo and behold, it was obviously a redesign of the garden with everything down to the exact variety of plant to be planted. So needless to say, we had an authenticated Farrand plan. We had to implement it.
There's a lot of restoration of Beatrix Farrand's gardens today, and I'm very happy to see that because they are works of art. It's like rediscovering a Rembrandt.
While living in New Haven, Farrand was hired by Yale University to be the landscape architect for the campus.
The work that she did at Yale was significant. I would say that she affected about 75% of the whole campus. And there are good courtyards left. They are very unusual in the stance that she took, which has been imitated by all campuses in the country, of using basically trees and grass, of using the walls of the courtyards as places for planting.
During the recent renovation of Yale's residential colleges, there was an expectation that the Beatrix Farrand designed courtyards would retain their visual integrity.
And as a designer, it's been a fascinating exercise to try to understand the original design intent and can we do that now.
In 1927, the Farrands moved to California when Max accepted the position of director of the Huntington Library in San Marino. Beatrix remained consulting landscape architect at Yale for nearly 20 more years. When Max Farrand retired in 1941, the Farrands moved back to Mount Desert Island in Maine, where they transformed her family summer home at Reef Point into a study center for New England flora. Beatrix continued her work at Reef Point until 1955, when she closed the center and moved to the more manageable Garland Farm property, which would be her final home and garden. Beatrix Farrand died in 1959 at the age of 86. Over the course of her lifetime, Beatrix Farrand received many honors, including honorary membership in the American Institute of Architects, the 1947 Garden Club of America Achievement Medal, and the 1952 New York Botanical Garden Distinguished Service Award. She also held honorary degrees from both Yale University and Smith College. Today, the legacy of Beatrix Farrand lives on.
I think that Farrand did pave the way for women in landscape architecture. She certainly influenced me.
I think as a practitioner, I personally owe Farrand such a debt because she took the field of garden design, which is what women were associated with, and she was really the first woman to operate and design on a much larger scale in an institutional setting. It opened the doors that we all still follow in her footsteps today.